Okay, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode number 176 with my guest and friend, Khuent Rose. This is Quent's second time on the podcast, and we pick up kind of where we left off. We talk about his experiences growing up black, talking about what it's like to be gay in his community, just what it means to be nice, what is empathy versus kindness. I always enjoy talking with Khuent. He is a real thinker. A lot of people I run into, including myself, our thoughts are, a mile wide and a foot deep. But Khuent is, he digs deep on a lot of stuff, and I just really enjoy talking with him. Aside from that, he's an amazing pan player, like a virtuoso pan player, musical theorist, educator, and he is a pan tuner, basically self-taught. Also living in Brooklyn, and I've seen him sort of resurrect old pans that look like they should be in the dumpster, and he brings them back to life and gets them back out in the world. So anyway, big fan of Khuent, and I hope you are too. I hope you enjoy this conversation. I hope you're doing well, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Khuent Rose. Take care. Bye. All right, take a swig of the potion here. All right, Khuent Rose. We're gabbling this to order, buddy.
Okay.
Whether you like it or not. Okay. How you doing, man?
I'm pretty good.
Well, yeah, I think we need to stop asking that question of others for
How are they doing?
The next 6 months, maybe just a moratorium on the phrase "How are you doing?"
I mean, I guess, but it's useful. Otherwise, in American culture, what do you say to somebody to greet them? Because the answer is going to be deflected anyway.
We got to have a new one, like "Hello, I know you're probably shitty." Like,
no,
start with that.
It's part of the American dream. It's one of those habits to live in a world of people with shit. Well, they don't though. It's all an act. In my whole life, I've had one specific statement follow me, and I've never followed it, which is be nice. Be nice. I've had so many people my whole life tell me, be nice. I taught preschool for 3 years. I never allowed any student to use the term be nice.
Why?
Because it's an act. It's literally an act. The definition of being nice means however you happen to feel, be nice. We try to make it benevolent and say it's like kindness. No. When you're asking someone to be kind, you're asking them to behave and feel empathy, right? When you're asking them to be nice, you're asking them to portray empathy, even though you're seething inside.
Yeah, I like that you make the distinguish there, because being kind is an act of empathy. I mean, it does, like, but have you heard the phrase? I mean, have you ever done much traveling to, like, the South, like Texas, Georgia, Alabama?
Yeah, I used to go to North Carolina once a year for like a couple of years as a teenager. But I have a lot of friends from down south.
There's also, like, it's a similar vibe. Like, there's a phrase. It's called Minnesota nice. Like that. The sort of demeanor in the South, for example, is like everything's like you call everybody Mr. Josh.
Yeah.
And everything's like, yes sir. Everything's very polite, very kind on the surface. And again, not everybody is an asshole, but by and large, the sort of baseline is sort of like, yes sir, Mr. Josh, like right there. And then in Massachusetts, in Minnesota, it's a different sort of I don't want to say deference. There's like we love you, welcome here. Like everything's very calm, like very kind and welcoming all the time. Kind of like you could run somebody's dog over and they'll be just, oh, well, how you doing? Have you seen the weather recently? I'm really sorry to hear about my dog. Like it's just like a weird cultural thing, and it's called Minnesota nice. I'm definitely sort of painting with a broad brush here, but
I got you. It's the same assumption that all New Yorkers are aggressive and angry people that don't want to make eye contact.
Yeah. You just walk by a million people and it's perceived as being rude. If you walked and talked like that in Dover, Ohio, where I'm from, or in Trinidad even, like if you like, one of the things that Kendall and I talked about this, and I notice it now. It's like my dad was in a wheelchair, so I see wheelchair ramps now everywhere I look. And Kendall told me this.
That was not
that he how did he say it? It was something like he was really bothered when he walks in the room and says good night and no one responds in American culture. And now when I go, like when I'm in Trinidad, everybody responds when somebody says good morning, good day, or good night. Everybody. And
Hmm.
in Ohio, it's not that people like there's a the way that we all say hello is like you just walk by on the street, you nod, and it's not rude if you don't respond hello or good night back. But in Trinidad or in parts of Brooklyn,
Which
you
is like
bet.
Trinidad.
Yeah, it's anyway. It's just to me,
Yeah,
it's
it's
interesting
like
to see how different pockets of the country see and
I've
act.
been
And
trying to I've been trying to behave like a sociologist in the last couple of years. I find that all the peaks into psychology and all that stuff, what they do is they force you to localize your understanding to an experience that's specific. And I was trying to figure out what are the real broad experiences that are happening that are becoming rules of our community and rules of our culture without realizing that they're rules of
right,
it. Like that being nice, like the way that we say hello or goodbye. And I've always noticed that in growing up, the school that I went to growing up was mostly West Indian teachers. And when I say mostly, I mean all. They were all West Indian teachers. So I didn't see an American or even white teacher until I was in the eighth grade, where I had some weird program where they would take students to Stuyvesant and take classes. And even then, I had the same weird cultural shocks. I would walk into classrooms and say, good morning, good afternoon.
mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to learn, oh yeah, this is not normal for like classroom culture. Because
Right.
in the
Well,
home,
yeah,
you never walk
right.
into someone's home and see another human being alive in it and not greet them, and then to not have it said back. Um, the sentiment that I kind of inherited from the older people that raised me is specifically that the greeting is not just well wishing on someone. The greeting is that I acknowledge that you exist. It's just that. It's just that in that moment, I vocally acknowledge that you exist. So to say it back is like verification that you acknowledge me.
Can I
So when
ask?
someone doesn't say it, it comes with the gravitas of
Can
you didn't acknowledge my existence.
Can I ask a question? And I again, I'm asking out of ignorance here, and you can tell me if I'm anywhere close to on base here. But the the tenor of discussion right now in society about inclusion and the way we talk about different populations of people who are served or underserved or privileged or underprivileged, all of those things, there is a sense that I get that, like in the Caribbean culture, if your baseline, the baseline there is acknowledgement of existence, like you just said, like that's the sort of foundation upon people are dealing. That's not something that ever crosses my mind when I say hello to somebody or somebody says hello to me. And I'm curious for you if this is something that you think is tied to the like the colonialism, all of that stuff for hundreds and hundreds of years, where people literally were looking at cultures and people and not even like pretending like they don't exist. And
Um,
like, how
yes.
am I projecting here, or like what?
No, 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 no. You're not projecting. You're observing. Um, you- you're observing. You're noticing this either the conversation or the behaviors between the different groups of people. You're just observing. It's important that we get away from seeing the differences or the subtle differences in communities as just immediately like we're getting too racially charged. I hate using that word because we're all one human race, but we're getting like sensitive to it too much. I think that you should always consider that your heart about this is to seek understanding in what is different, what is the same. Like you're always seeking an answer. So you personally, or anyone that you know of that's always in this, why do you all do this? Like what is this about? Like why do you eat doubles with your hands instead of on a plate? Like
I
why
don't
is
wonder
like
about
this?
that. I'm fine with that. That makes total sense to me. Are you kidding me?
But it could be subtle things like
Yeah,
that that
yeah.
you are not new to, but someone else may be new to that they're seeking an answer for. That is the heart of how we avoid all of the racial crazy. Because then we seek to understand, well, why is this normal in your culture as opposed to this is abnormal in your culture? So you're not projecting ever. Just never. I never even consider it.
I
Um,
appreciate that, but it doesn't feel that way sometimes. But
no,
I appreciate
feeling,
it.
yeah, feeling is, law de facto, law and action.
Yeah,
I got you. I
yeah.
got you. As far as that dichotomy, maybe in the Caribbean communities, I think that there's no way to avoid the spillover of colonialism at all. You can't separate it and say, well, this thing is African and this thing is colonial. One of my religious practices is kind of blended between uh, Judeo-Christian systems and West African systems. When I first got involved in it, it was very, very like blended. You would say Christian prayers and then African prayers right next to each other
Hmm.
in the same ceremony. And at first, I'd be like, "Wait, what am I doing? Are they trying to channel two different types of vibration?" You try to go through some kind of like quantum physics in the mind until you realize, no, this is what the various people were doing to be honorable to the various traditions that they had.
Hmm.
Right? But in doing so, the thing that they now are for hundreds of years is this mix of both. So there's not a separation between the African and the Euro American experience. When it comes to that need for acknowledgement, I think that there is less. Okay, big paradigm. Okay, think of it as, I try not to think of everything as two big paradigms, but in extremes of the bell curve of life. If
Hmm.
you think of two paradigms of life, we're either thriving or surviving. And thriving is on one end of the bell curve and surviving is on the other. Okay. In that, the people in the middle are afraid of either end. Okay, they're afraid of how much it takes to thrive. They're afraid of what it's going to
Hmm.
feel like to starve. Maybe say starving. Let's
And
say
they're
that
and they're
starving
afraid of how quickly you can go from one end to the
from
other
one to the other
in
in
24 hours or
let
less.
me
Like
tell you
it's
something,
yeah,
in one child support payment.
right.
Okay. So let's say that instead, that the people in the middle are surviving, and then there's starving and thriving. So a lot of times, people of color, through the many systems of exploitation and history, colonialism, genocide, whatever the causes have been, pure hatred, ignorance, selfishness, whatever they've had a tendency to put people with a lot of melanin on the starvation side.
Hmm.
The people, okay, so we can consider that happens in the 16, 17, 18, 1900. Okay. Now we're into the 2000s. And while I may not feel the whip of a slave owner on my back, that's not happening to me. I may notice how difficult it is for me to get alone.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right? Because all of those things were designed or kind of put into place by one set of people and then taught to another set of people to make their life easier. That sounds really brutal to think that slavery was done that way, but I think that like all of those things that we think of like systems of oppression, instead of seeing it specifically as hatred for one group of people caused you to behave this way, I always tend to see it as your fear of something happening to your own group is manifesting as hatred for this other group.
Hmm.
So even those subtle things, I know some people that grew up in a very colonialized Judeo-Christian household that are now like very radical Rastafarians.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
hey, make a left turn on the highway.
Hmm.
So it's a matter of what part of that culture you claim and what part you understand. Because if you, for instance, were to grow up thinking of the head nod as you are acknowledging another human being alive, the likelihood of you deflecting it is a lot. There's a whole different percentage
Hmm.
than someone that's told, yeah, nod at somebody if they see you, honey. It's okay. The gravitas of the behavior is really different. And I think in the Black community, this idea that you need to hold a public code of respect
Hmm.
for your safety, eh, totally, I
Hmm.
think it's a little different in predominantly white communities where a lot of it has to do with like, don't embarrass your family, don't embarrass yourself, kind of thing. That may be slightly more prevalent as opposed to when you go outside, you may die based off of how you interact with someone in your own community, or how you interact with police, or how you interact with someone from another community and how they
Hmm.
interact with the police. So there's always this code of like, keep up the portrayal of being nice, being respectful. You
Hmm.
know, when it's the same thing, be respectful. What do you mean? I don't respect you, so I'm behaving the way that that I want to.
Yeah,
I curse you out because I don't respect you.
these things are. I mean, when you say like when I don't know, I have a real trigger like hair trigger when people are like demand trust or they demand respect or they
Oh,
demand like you should respect the office or respect your elders and all these things like I mean I don't go out of my way to like hold up elders you must earn my respect like but it's a two-way street. It's a dance, and being
yeah.
kind, being empathetic requires it's an act of checking yourself for 2 seconds and being like, I don't know what it feels like. I don't have black skin. I'll never have black skin, but I can shut my eyes and through what limited experience I have in my head play out the scenario that it would be like I just heard this study the other day there's this company that's devising these VR goggles that
Mm,
you decide like what color skin tone do you want, and so like you choose
okay.
like I want to be Nigerian, so I turn that way up, and then they're just like okay great, and now you pick a neighborhood you want to walk around in, and so they're like New York City, and so a Nigerian walking around New York City, and basically you're just walking around, and the people in the video are looking
Interact.
at you in the way that based on your skin color, right? And they're like, you want to choose a white person, and you're just soaring through town, and like nobody. But then as the darker your skin gets, depending on what store you walk into, your skin color could be brown. But if you're black, walking into a store that was owned by a Dominican, like all of these things are so nuanced and messy. But for me
Mhm.
as a white person, if I put those VR goggles on, I think that what they're trying to do is really hit the idea that this stuff is learned, that racism,
Yeah.
all of this stuff is taught to you because somebody told you, oh, be afraid of this person or X, Y, and Z. And if you can sort of show people it needs to be their idea. You can't tell people they're racist and have them wake up one day and be like, you know what,
Yeah, that doesn't
they're
work.
right, you're right. They have to know. They have to know what that feels like to have a cop look at them funny or to have a store owner just sort of have their little price gun just walking around behind you every time you shop.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Like I get into, I don't want to say arguments, but I get into pointless debates, I guess, with very close friends of mine over
Mm-hmm.
things of like racial politics,
Mm,
gay politics, women's liberation, and um, the state of men in the social climate, like all these different things
right.
that currently we're talking about. We're kind of living through. Me too. You too. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's we're living in this kind of climate. So sometimes we get into these conversations, and I find that there is a need to hold on to their personal identity so badly
Mm-hmm.
that the cognitive dissonance between the ideals they speak about and the life that they're forced to choose to live, they can't do. Straight friends, you know, they think that that being gay is being weaponized against the black community to lower birth rates. Fine. Please stop telling straight people to have gay kids. The straight people need to stop having gay kids. You need to figure out how to do that part first.
Sorry, I never thought about it that way, but that's hilarious. Like your next
Um,
logic is like, all right, well, fine, get your asses to work. Stop
yeah,
telling straight people to have gay
and
kids.
you, yeah, that's
Seems
kind of
like
the
an
heart
easy
of the
fix. I
problem.
mean, right?
I mean that, and if you really want to get away from, if you and this is a hard line situation, if you really want to protect the sanctity of marriage, outlaw divorce.
Make it a really hard thing to get divorced.
No, 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 no. Punishable by jail time. Make it a crime.
That's what I'm saying. Make it something that you really don't want to have to do. Like you are gonna
Oh,
have to
that's what
know
I'm
what
getting at. Hard
you're gonna.
labor, mandatory, 7 years.
Oh, well, okay. Well, you went a little harder in the paint on the time the sentence,
No,
but
listen. I think that for a long time, I've had friends, commit suicide because they happen to be gay, and the
mm-hmm,
parents kick them out their
mm,
house, and their friends turn their back on them. They're on the football team, on the track team. They were on the dance team, and everybody knew they was gay. But whatever. So I kind of look at it like I've seen these people go through horrible depression just because of something no one ever saw them do.
yeah.
Made everyone
What's the appropriate proportional response to that? And 7 years
Right.
seems like a small price to pay when you look at.
I
I mean,
think that
listen, I had one of my closest friends in college. He didn't. I can't. I mean, there are many reasons why, but I think him being gay and being uncomfortable in his family and being just bullied at some point in his life pretty mercilessly. Like, I know for a fact it affected the way he saw the world. It affected the way he drank alcohol. It affected the way he took pills. Like, all of those
that
things.
we
And
don't.
I was close to. I played with him for 2 years straight, and he was one of my closest. He was the first gay person I ever really knew intimately. Like, and I asked him the question I asked you about, like, race and saying hello. Like, I asked him, what is it? What is being gay? I mean, I was 19. I didn't know. And I asked him, and he very calmly over beer just told me. And I was like, "Do you look at your boyfriend the same way? Like, how do you look at your boyfriend? I just am trying, like, tell me." And he's like, "How do you look at Stephanie?" And listen, but it was the type
Yeah,
of relationship I had with somebody where he wasn't going to run
he's
screaming off the room
comfortable.
because he knew. And I
Yeah.
could, but man, it's not like asking that question and him answering it was easy for him or me.
No,
But
no.
but he really he just looked at me and he said, "Well, when I roll over in the morning, I look at him and I think I'm the luckiest person in the world." And kind of, yeah, the day sucks, other stuff sucks, but like that's a big relief to start my day that way. And I was like, "Oh, well, that's how I feel about Stephanie, so cool." Not it wasn't a problem, but that question for me had been answered, and I wish there was a VR goggles for that too. Like, everybody just needs to be able to get VR goggles on and ask the questions that they feel like they need to ask, and have somebody be kind to them when that happens. But again, it's
I
trust.
still think
You can't
I
just
think
ask
it
that. You
comes
can't ask
down
that question of a total stranger. Like, you gotta.
to,
Yeah.
but look how much anxiety is surrounding this particle of his identity. It's the same thing. He identifies that part of himself as being crucial,
Mm-hmm.
and and because other people have seen it that way, have seen it a certain way, they've held it against him. So now he feels like anxiety about it. He's vulnerable. He's cautious. He's all these other things in his life, just because of the way he's treated over this one thing. I think that of all people that would understand this would be black people. That this thing that they feel
Mm.
they have no control over causes the world to, for whatever reason, causes some people to just have an inflated reaction to do it for no reason. That isn't that the same thing? It's the same thing with women. Just because my body has a different set of codes,
Functionalities.
CATGC,
Yeah. There's.
yeah,
It just is a
all of a
different.
sudden
Yeah.
I don't have as many, my muscles aren't as strong. I used to hear this argument that one of the reasons is that women aren't physically as strong as men. That's one of the reasons that there's so much kind of divide. I mean, talking from professors that I've had this conversation about, like,
Divide on what,
what is
but in
really
what?
at the
I mean,
heart of,
because on a, like, factual basis, they're not
yes,
wrong. But like,
earlier
what's the
economies required brawn. I
no?
got
But
you.
what
I
was the
agree.
context? Why would you say? What was the point of saying that about women and men? That's what I
Because
want to
he was
know.
trying to say, because my argument was it's a habit of the ruling class to suppress everybody else. That to me is actually the root of it.
Yeah.
And this other professor said no, people are intrinsically good, but when you consider that most labor was physical, and because women weren't for the most part the stronger part of the species, it made it easier for men who were the stronger physical parts of the species to dominate the labor force, therefore set up the system for their benefit. So I think both of those things
Mm-hmm.
are true. But if you are a enlightened person, you may consider that your wife does not want to be trapped in your cave, pregnant all day long,
Right.
cleaning up for you.
Right.
And to think, and just to be clear, I don't have a problem with the traditional household if it works for that household,
Sure. Yeah.
because I think that 40 hours of a single guy working at a job where he's making enough money in his 40 or 50 hours of work a week to sustain himself, a home, a wife, and a child nowadays means you are doing something very stressful. And you need to have someone manage your home.
Especially during a pandemic, where people are
Okay.
trying to go
So
to work and.
most housewives are not this, I want to stay home and file my nails and not do anything. A lot of women grew up with the ideology of I need to have a child as a component of my contribution to the family. So they did everything they could to be physically attractive to their husbands, to be sexually available to their husbands. We're going to talk about that aspect of it. keeping a home that was immaculate, almost like a hotel. That's where we get the '50s wife from. It seemed like a Rolling Stepford wives.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're like a robot, but it's somewhere in the mixture of that ideal of, you know what, I want things to be easy for everybody, and this is the system that seems to work for a lot of people,
Mm.
right? Even that is part of the trickle down from the thing about colonialism. That was the idea of polygamy or polyandry. I promise you, there were if it wasn't for the Catholic Church and its influence on early America, there would be a whole lot of sister wives going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because there already were a bunch of sister wives going on. They didn't even know they were wives or sisters to each other, which is the difference. Okay. All of those like subtle concepts trickle down. They just become like a habit. You should get married. It's okay if you have someone on the side. That's kind of like a thing that's not talked about, but we know exists in male culture. Why? Because a woman is always afraid of getting pregnant. That's you see what I'm saying? Like these are things we don't say, but there are an unspoken truth that men have for centuries, subtly, unconsciously, without thinking about it, passed it on as a code. This is how life is, guys.
Man, as you were
Same thing in the
talking,
black community with everything else that we do.
as you were talking, there's a book. Do you know he's a pimp, but he's an author named Iceberg Slim. And the one book I read is just called Pimp, and he talks a
This
lot.
sounds familiar.
It's really really good. I heard about it from a Dave Chappelle special where he was
Probably where I've also heard about this.
he was just talking about why the relationship, like why certain things in the black community are the way they are, and he said something in the special, or he was talking about the book, and like he mentions off, and again I want to be careful here, but like he says one of the reasons like black women will stand by their husband no matter how they treat them, whether it be domestic violence or whatever, but that culture in the community is because it comes from hundreds of years of no matter how bad the wife at home has it, the man had it way worse. No matter how bad their day was, being in the field, being beaten was like, and he talked about this book, and I read this book, and I was just like, there's a whole underculture of way people act, the way people talk to each other, the way people treat each other, that is so dark and complicated. And it, like you said before, starting in the 1600s.
Yeah.
And it's not like, something happens and a year later there's a change. It is every minute of every day. Somebody subtly, from one slave owner beating somebody and that guy going home. Mm-hmm. When I say home, going to wherever it was he was allowed to sleep on that plantation. And those conversations happening between husband and wife or couples that weren't allowed to say it out loud. And then the next day, on March 2nd, it happens again. And then March 3rd, 1619, it happens again. And then March 4th, and then here you are, December 31st of 1619. What happens on the New Year's Eve party? The same thing, and it does that for 400 years. Here we are in 2020. I think we as people need to work a little harder to understand why. I mean, when I hear people say pull yourself up by your bootstraps, I'm like, yo, bro, I understand what you're saying, but you need to look at, like, well, why are all these black people, why can't they just get on, why can't they get a job? I'm like, yo, bro, I know what you're saying. I get
hear
it, but
the words coming out your mouth, but do you understand the gravity of what you're saying?
Right. It's like, man, you have been alive for 22 years on this earth, and you look at things as if this can all be fixed tomorrow. Like I said, March 1st, 1619. And then March 2nd, these are day after day after day.
Yep.
So this idea that we're going to solve it tomorrow, and if we don't solve it tomorrow, we failed. It's like, man, it's going to take another 400 years of day after day of just, constantly trying to remedy that. And it happens on that local level, like saying goodnight and responding. Like those are tiny little signals. They're little red flares that go up that sort of tell you how you can act in a room. Kendall talks, like I said, Kendall mentions that when he walks into a room at Princeton.
True. How you act, that's true.
And but not just how you act in a room, how you act in a neighborhood. When I walk in a neighborhood in Crown Heights, I don't act the way I act when I walk in a neighborhood in Connecticut.
The need for code switching is the same thing, because when you talk about the I hate that my memory does not hold on to names well. I had a lecture at City Tech. It was concerning a woman's book. Thank God I read the book. But there's a scene that she writes about. Can't remember if it's like her retelling a story or not, but there's a scene where she writes about a little girl and her maid. And it just so happened, I think it was the day Martin Luther King got shot or something like that.
Hmm.
And the girl and the maid is in the house, um, like crying and weeping to herself. And the little white girl comes in, and this happens to be the owner's daughter, the owner, no, the her boss's daughter, whoever hired her to clean and to be the house person. And sees the lady crying and tries to console her by saying, "Oh, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." Now, mind you, the little girl is doing her best to console her caregiver. But this black woman, of course, is annoyed that I'm back at work working for a bunch of white people and they just shot Martin Luther King.
Hmm.
So she kind of like snaps at the little girl and says, "Don't you understand? They killed him. They killed the one person that she kind of like rants for a minute or so." And she notices that the little girl now becomes kind of like startled by how aggressive she is and begins to kind of tear up. And she immediately has to snap out of it and wipe the tears from her eyes, run to the refrigerator, grab some ice cream, and tell her, "Come." She said, "No, no, 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 come, baby. It's going to be okay." Hug her and try to calm her down because her survival mode wasn't in motion for a second. The code switch was, there's the woman that I am at work and there's the woman that I am.
Hmm.
And strong emotion, remember the survival and the thrive thing? When you're thriving, you don't care. You can be yourself. If I'm making $6 million a day, okay, if I'm Bezos's sugar boy, I don't know, whatever he needs to call me to give me a tenth of his income, whatever, bro. You can find me online. You got Google. I got an Amazon. I'm the only Quent on the planet.
Hit me on the Cash
Kids,
App.
hit me on the Cash App for a one time. Okay, one time payments are fine. You just let me know. I'll open OnlyFans. We'll get it popping. Apparently, I like stuff. Well, listen, I can't do kids, but I wear a diaper. What you need? What you need? I don't have pride. I have needs. Okay, I need some money. I got some family with debt. Sorry, what I was going was.
That's
Come
fine.
back. I'm
It's
coming back.
amazing how quickly we give up our scruples and are willing to just do whatever we need to do to, you know.
Scruples. Some of y'all are still counting in rupees. Okay, we need to cut this out. Cut this out. So she has to code switch between who she is and who she has to portray herself as. If she's thriving, when she's home and she's cooked a meal for her kids and they're free and they're running around and she don't got to worry about, oh, it's Saturday morning, I don't got to go back to work till Monday. It's a free feeling. Everyone in the community is safe. You get to go outside. Kids are playing. We're gonna have a cookout and whatever. You have your regular community things. And that mindset, for a lot of Black America, I grew up learning that that's how white people grow up. That's how everyone that wasn't Black, everyone that wasn't a little darker than a paper bag, um, that's how they lived with this kind of freedom to live whoever they are. And the only thing that they ever worried about was embarrassing themselves too much.
Mm.
Seriously, this is how I grew up thinking. Well, not so much grew up thinking, but remember that school I told you I went to? They made it clear to us that that mindset is what happens when you don't serve, when you're not starving,
Mm.
when you've moved out of starvation, when you moved out of survival mode. Because even if you're living in a penthouse and you're a school principal, you may be surviving, right? You're doing well, but you also know if you lose that job, you slip to starvation really, really fast. Now, if you're one of the Bezoses, you're a Clinton, a Bush, if you're a former president of the United States, a former prime minister, if you're someone like that, you're living in the Thrive area. You could be whoever you want. You could be a Dennis Rodman.
Mm.
You could be a Michael Jackson. You could own an island. You could be one of these mega $1 million preachers that say whatever they want to. Give your
Yeah.
donations. The Lord wants you to give. The Lord needs you to give $1 million because my jet needs half
Yeah.
a million dollars a
The
year in
prosperity
fees.
gospel stuff drives me nuts.
It does in a way. It is useful for it's useful as an antidepressant. I can get into that, but My
I know. Well,
experience, I tend to be very
I'm
skeptical.
biased because my wife's a pastor, and she like I understand what you're saying, but on the other side, like one of the things that if you're not careful with antidepressants, or let me just, I would say not antidepressants. I would say it's more like candy, like this. If you're constantly convincing yourself of
Mhm.
something and there's no there, then you're just taking empty calories in, and especially as it
Yep.
pertains to religion, those folks who are saying, selling you their book from the pulpit, they're fleecing you. Like
Yes.
they're not using that to like run soup kitchens and food pantries, and they're not using it to
Exactly.
deal with systemic racism. They're using it to buy a jet.
Okay.
And like, so no matter how it makes you feel, how your feelings are being monetized for someone else's benefit is incredibly dangerous. And
And I've been a minister for at least 15 years,
mhm.
a long time. I'm talking about marriage counseling, baby blessings, which in let's have the conversation about transubstantiation, like the whole gambit of it.
Mhm.
And I've learned that religion has a very powerful effect on the psychosomatic parts of your body, the parts of you that, because you believe in it, they can manifest in real time in your body. I believe
Mhm.
I've seen that happen time and time again. I've also seen it happen way outside the church without the name of Jesus ever being called.
Right.
Why? Because it's a human's experience, and some humans need the rigidity of religion because they don't know how to compartmentalize or decompartmentalize the who they are from the who that they're trying to be or the who they're portraying.
I
Um,
mean, I have that sometimes. I mean, that's one of the reasons. That's one of when I go to see my wife work. It's
mm,
one of the reasons I go is to sort of use that hour to detach from distractions and sort of check. I mean, I like the communion with people. I like the self. I like the sort of recitation of things,
okay.
doing things as a group. But I also like it as a time to just be like, where is my bullshit? Like I'm gonna sit for an
Okay.
hour and try to find my own BS, and sometimes I sit there for an hour and I find nothing, and I'm like, well, I know I didn't look very hard, you know. But then some
And
days I sit there
and
and I
that's the
think,
truth, though.
but some days I sit there and I really am like, oh yeah, this thing I actually don't believe that anymore, and that it helps me. That's how church helps me.
That's why I always, anytime that someone is having this experience that you're having, where you find a practical, personal, involved, active use for the church, I always remind people that all of the gurus, all of the Buddhists, all of the deep monks, all of the esoterics, they have done this one specific thing where they go alone to their sacred space. Jesus goes and heals the sick. All right, guys, I'll be back. Goes into the wilderness for 40 days.
Hmm.
Sleeping on a boat. I know I'm not going to die till I'm like 33. I'm chilling. I'm only 32. Right, he's chilling on the boat. Boat's going crazy. He's whatever. I'm just going to go back to sleep. Jesus, we're dying. He gets up, wipes the boogers out of his eye. Yo, shut up. I'm trying to sleep. Peace be still. Goes back to sleep. What does he do after? As soon as he gets off the boat, he can't even get off the boat long enough. He goes and the guy living in the cemetery that's beating himself with he likely has autism, and they're chaining him up. So he's just having a tantrum constantly because you chained up someone with autism. Jesus walks to him and he's like, "Oh snap! What's up, Holmes?" Stands up straight, runs into him, and everything's fine. What does he do after? I need to take a break, guys.
Yeah.
It's this need of spirit. It's like confusion. I have to rethink what I'm doing here and then take a break to make it actually set in. That is the real reason behind religion, behind any spirituality that turns into a life practice.
Hmm.
It's to see the craziness of life, try something, and try something that's not just what you think you know. Try something really divine. Put who you are to work instead of what you know. What you know can get you some results, but the thing that's going to get you the result is when you become who you are. So it's a very esoteric thing to talk about, but we all know what it feels like,
Hmm.
right? That's when you start talking about how it makes you feel and when you can sit down and check your own bullshit. That aspect of knowing where you are weak and know by your own standard, and knowing where you are strong, again, by your own standard, is the way that we become more divine. Some people are afraid of this idea of becoming like, oh, you're trying to be like God. No, God is already everywhere. So what I'm trying to do is just connect to this thing that's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
If they saw it that way, they become all of a sudden they become so docile. They become less aggravated.
Mm-hmm.
But God's in the gay guy and the black guy. He's in the Nazi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's in the Confederate. He's in Attorney General Barr. He's in Trump. He, they, it. It's just as animating to them as it is to me. So when you start thinking about what's really different, like why is this person this way? Why don't they understand? Where's their empathy? Right? Where's their love? Where's their mind?
Yeah.
You have to start considering that the thing that animates all of us, the thing that's really powerful about all of us, is indiscriminate. It just turns us on. It does not give a shit what we do with it. It just turns us on. The meaning of life is to do something with it.
Right.
For some people, they sit on the couch, they do nothing, and sometimes that works because sometimes they're a good example. They become part of a growing statistic. What does that statistic say? People that sit on the couch and do nothing all their lives develop these diseases.
Right.
Now, someone like you and someone like me is like, I want to sit on my ass all day long. What's the worst that can happen? Then you see Supersize Me, and you're like, fuck that. I'm going to get up and walk around my house 7 times.
Right. Yeah, I mean...
So, look at the world that way. Just do not become another Trump. We don't look at the world that way. We look like, oh, we got to fight the Trumps. Wait. First, identify what made Trumps.
Well,
because
and again, but sorry to interrupt, but I look at somebody like Trump the same way that I look at somebody like slavery in March of 1619. Like, Trump is not somebody that is like, there's not like a row of presidents at Target that you just go in and you're like, I'm going to pick that one. It's like, okay, yes, in a sense, that's what happened. We picked Trump. But him being who he is a result of,
many.
March 3rd, 1949, when he was born, or whatever it is, and he comes out and his dad says something to him. And then March 2nd, or March 4th, his dad says another thing to him. And then March 5th, his dad actually doesn't allow black people to rent any of his buildings. And then March 6th,
thank you.
It's like all of these things. And so
or turn Coney Island into a piece of shit.
So when we look at people like Donald Trump, I'm just like, he was a baby.
Right.
And he was turned. Now, again, I'm not an evolutionary geneticist or biologist, but on some level, and I think that does play into stuff. But on some level, he was taught this slowly over a long period of time. We are all systems. All of us are systems, and he is a particular system that was built by putting one grain of hate on the pile every day of his life. And here we are now.
No, we got to be careful. Look, we have to be careful. We have to be careful. Okay.
What was that? Where was I? What was I not careful with? I'm just curious.
The hatred. Sometimes it's not. Remember, it's more. In my experience, I've found that when you have deep discussion with racist people, with people that come across hateful, when you have discussion with them outside of their trigger, it actually is difficult to find the hatefulness. It's difficult to find the racism. You move outside of that trigger, you don't let them see someone of melanin, all of a sudden, they're actually a regular person. For instance, I've seen this before where I'm either the only black guy in a group of musicians, music composition, they many composers there were in the 90s. Early 2000s in Brooklyn College. There's speaks in Russian. You kind of get accustomed to people seeing you as like, oh, you're the cool guy. So, you come with like culture and stuff. And they come with their like, I've been studying the piano for 27 years and I'm 26. You got to kind of like combat that. Somewhere in the mix of that, you learn that the things that they would normally hold against other black people, other people of color, other Caribbean people, they wouldn't necessarily hold against you if they've been forced to see you outside of their trigger. I don't know if you've seen the movie. It's a movie about a black police deputy that acts like a white Ku Klux Klan member, ends up befriending.
I think the Black Klansman or something, right?
Yes. And the way that he was able to do that is to approach the issue outside of its trigger. You are merely triggered by the way that I sound, or the way it could be the dialect that I speak in, it could be just the way that I look. If you connect to me outside of that trigger and then you see me, it confuses your trigger. It actually will make you hesitate to pull it. Then the more that you know me, the less likely that that trigger will happen. All reformed racists have the same exact MO. They grow up, I grew up learning this thing this way. I have the same exact thing that you're saying. Their environment kind of inculcates into them, and they become normalized to this unspoken of rule that's sometimes very blatantly spoken about in private or in public. And then they grow up just normalizing it inside. They have these ideas. Well, when I was 13, we had this guy that stole a pen from my father's house. It was a really expensive pen, so now black people steal. Now I don't trust black people. That's kind of thing that happens, and I kind of just I have an example of the thing I've been indoctrinated into. So now it's evidence.
Mm-hmm.
It's evidence of my indoctrination. Wendy and William were holding hands. Now Wendy's pregnant. Mama said, if you hold hands, you get pregnant. I'm never holding nobody's hands. Right? They get that kind of thing when they're like 6 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
Then they grow up their whole life having an aversion to being casually affectionate.
Well,
It's like weird.
that's my point about Trump, though. Like every day of his life,
But is
he
it
was.
hatred?
What's that?
But is it being fed hatred? That's where I
I
think
well,
if
I
you tell your white friends to be careful that they're not making their friends hateful, or they're not teaching their children hatred, they will not understand you. Even if you use the word bias, it makes it seem like you think I'm not smart enough to know when I'm being biased. The trick to it is to tell them, be careful of what you are showing is different. What are you saying is different? Because if I've had this argument, I am not racist. I am not racist, but you won't. But you're angry at your daughter for being with the black guy. No, it's not that he's a black guy. You know, I don't know what kind of job he's going to make. I don't. He says to go to a list of like, these are all things you think about because he's black,
Mm-hmm.
and he can't. He couldn't put the two together. So we ran an experiment. After like 2 months, I said, you know, bring another guy to the house, bring a white guy to the house and see you have a response. Then all of a sudden, his reaction was a lot more benign. He sat down and talked to the guy.
Mm-hmm.
What is that telling you? He doesn't see his disdain for one group over the other as being racist. In his mind, he's protecting his daughter. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally,
That
totally.
that's the same shit that happens in the black community. I'm extremely racist. Are you kidding me? I went to school and actually read the history books. I paid attention. I live in Crown Heights with a high population of Hasidic Jews. Racism, discrimination, bigotry. I once had a group of 3 Hasidic men stand at the corner, and because the bell, there's like an alarm that goes off that tells them sun is down or it's around this time that they should stop. You know, they have to observe their religious observance of not working because it's Sabbath. Where they stopped me and asked me to carry their bags. Now, I want you to think about how this sounds in the year 2019 to have me carry 3 Jewish men's bags home. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I just took my headphones back in and kept walking. I've done it before for older Jewish men, like these old ladies that got the cart. Can you help me with it? Yes, I'm going to walk you 17 blocks. I'm going to put you in an Uber. I've done all of that. When you're older, because I've already learned to normalize this person may die today, help them. That's
Well,
actually how I see old.
I think when I talk about Trump as being this like every human being is an accumulation of everything, like your genetics, your environment, your family, everything, your experience, the grades you get in school, and how you think about those things. Like all of that stuff matters. And
So you realize you've been ruining people's lives for a couple of years, huh?
and I just for me I get really, it scares me when people are reductive about other people, even people like Donald Trump, and they're just like, Donald Trump is X, Y, and Z, and so therefore it's like, because it's easy, it makes you feel better to be like, it makes more sense if Donald Trump is this like crystallinely perfect Emperor Palpatine that we took off the shelf and he was installed as president. It's like, nope, he was a baby
Exactly.
who was taught a lot of things and had a lot of life experiences that made him think the way he thinks now. He had an alcoholic brother who died because his dad was abusive to his brother. So let's
But they
talk
don't know
about,
anything about that.
but like ask yourself, how rational would you see the world if your dad was abusive to your brother, he drank himself to death, now you don't drink anything other than Diet Coke as a result of that. No coffee, no alcohol, no nothing. Like,
Nothing.
he doesn't
Yep.
drink caffeine and alcohol not because he's a weird guy. It's because his brother died a horrible death of alcoholism and he's scarred. I mean,
So
this
he doesn't
idea,
want any kind of stimulants, any kind of anything that would enter his body that way.
but like this idea that we see him as this profoundly unhealthy person, but we look at his lack of drinking as sort of like we don't see, like, it's just, I don't know. I just, reductivism is it's exhausting to me. I want to pivot here real quick because I got one final question. I know
Sure.
you got to get going here. But I wanted to touch on this because he's come up in my mind a lot since the pandemic lockdown happened. I posted the other day that like Mark Brooks was the last person I shook hands with.
Mhm.
Like, and I don't know how, if you've thought about the last person you shook hands with or hugged when the pandemic happened, and maybe we've all had different experiences in shaking and hugging people recently, but
You mean like right before they were like, shut everything off?
right before it became apparent we shouldn't be shaking hands, Mark and I shook hands, and it really burned. It was really in my my memory, that moment imprinted on me. But shortly thereafter, Dougie passed away, and all of a sudden
Right.
now I was starting to see. I was forced to deal with what I thought a community was because everything, my entrance point to the community was Dougie, and Kendall first, but Dougie was the sort of father figure of the community that opened the door for me.
Right.
Now he's gone because of COVID-19, and it's every couple days I start to have these moments of anxiety where I think like I know what Dougie was doing on a daily basis and how encouraging he was to people like you and Damani and Kendall and other folks who came through. And I know we only got like 10 or 15 minutes here, buddy, before you got to run, but what for you has like, and I spoke with Dr. Don Batson the other day,
Mhm.
and it was just what for you is the thing. I worry that Dougie's legacy and the work that Dougie did. I don't worry that it's not going to be carried on in a beautiful way in some way, but I just worry that his existence is like poof, gone, and there's just so much chaos right now that like the due I think he's deserving of in terms of just a like calling balls and strikes of the doors he held open for people and creating Crossfire, the environment he created for not just students but yourself, arrangers, Damani and Kendall, to have this experience. I'm curious for you, what, if you've had time to think about it, what are some of the things you've just been thinking about after Dougie passed, and sort of what the last 6 months of chaos have sort of, where's your head been with that? Because my head's been spinning a little bit, and I'm just kind of curious because you were
Yeah.
closer to Dougie than me.
Um, Dougie, Dougie and I have a very strange kind of relationship. So Dougie, I don't want to say he was using me, but Dougie came to me for advice, basically. So there'd be days where Dougie's sitting in a councilman's office, and then the councilman's like, all right, um, if you want me to work on this project for you, you gotta have to bring me some representative of a band to speak to. I gotta make sure this is some legit stuff. So I'd be in a situation where Dougie comes into the school and they call my desk, they call my desk phone. I was like, I tell one of the students to answer the phone for me. I never answer the phone. I try not to ever answer the phone. I'm teaching. My job is too important to answer the damn phone. Um, they answer the phone. Hey, it's somebody from the front desk. Somebody at the front desk. Who is it? Your father. Father. Okay. So then I kind of just go back to teaching. All right, go back. And then Dougie would walk into the room. So for like the first year, everyone thought that Dougie was my father.
Did he just lie? Did he
Because
just lie when he walked
no,
to the school, or what?
when the woman came in, I said, her name is Melissa. She was our desk manager at the time. She was more than a desk manager. She was like the sole glue holding the school together that no one knew, that person. So she comes, she's like, hey, about your dad? I was like, so I said, yeah, dad. And he just stood there with this kind of like,
Yeah,
so
hands
I
on his
asked
belly
him,
like he does.
so I asked him, Like, why did you tell them that you were my father? She said, I didn't say that. When I asked for you, the front desk person looked and said, "Are you Quent's father?" And he said, "Oh, I wish." So that kind of just stuck.
Oh, got it. Okay.
But yeah, so I just kind of like, I'm not gonna hold this against you. Flashpoint, when my actual father came in, my 5'9", dark skinned Costa Rican father comes inside, then they're like, "You're Quent Rose, you're Mr. Rose's dad," and he smiles, and we have like that same big jawed, bright. So he's like, "Oh yeah, wait a minute. So who is that other guy?"
I feel
It's like
like
some other
you
guy.
have more teeth than most human beings, Kendall or Quinn. I feel like you just have
No,
you have like four more than the rest
no,
of us do.
no, bro. I actually have had many removed.
Okay.
I like sugar. I used to. I just had to get a root canal on this one. I just have a good dentist. You don't even see it. Oh
Nice,
yes, this is
nice.
all shaved down and crazy. But his passing hit me kind of sideways.
Mm.
I definitely spent a few days not eating and crying and doing stupid things and channeling. Where in the universe are you? What the hell did you do, Dougie? What is the problem? You try to go through those kind of transcendental meditations to are you left? Are you suffering here? And after a while, I had a now, mind you, when I have dreams, they're either in my head to just make me sleep, to just calm me down, or they're in my head because they're real. And I remember where we were standing somewhere and we were looking like empty racks or something. And it was a very brief thing where I stood in front of all of the empty racks and I knew he had walked up next to me because Dougie just has a weird, we always tell each other these weird jokes that only we would laugh at. And he pulled off one of those weird jokes and I laughed and I didn't even look, when you look over to acknowledge the person's there, and that was it. And that was like the end of the dream. That was the end of like the visit. Um, the holes that Dougie left, I say that to say he let me into a lot of very delicate information about what was happening almost all the time, text
Mm.
messages. I'd sometimes wake up and find like, why do I have Whitaker's tax reports? Like, yeah, he would send me like he sent me one time an email string between Whitaker reps and USSA about money and meeting times and all kinds of stuff. Crazy stuff that later on I saw some of those same letters end up in that scathing report about Whitaker a couple of months ago. Fuck him. So one of the places that I knew he was working with was the Brooklyn Arts Council. Luckily, I was kind of the liaison. So I was able to preserve that relationship with the Brooklyn Arts Council as their kind of like folklore, that's what the word, or folk culture
Mm.
liaison to the Caribbean community. So anytime that they have grants and things, they come and shoot them over to me, and then I have to present them to the group. When it comes to like USSA, currently Tony, who is the captain and band leader of Metro, which is a band from back when there was like 97 bands in Brooklyn.
Right.
He's currently taken the helm in some way. Um, when it comes to Crossfire, Damani is working with the Steel Band, and they're figuring out a way to work with the family to deal with that. Because when things are written in your name, that means you may also have things like debt from renting multiple utilities and all
Yeah,
kinds of
yeah.
things to pay off. So they want to make sure that that doesn't become a ticklish point in their relationship. Um, the hard thing is like the relationships with politicians. Those are the things with local government. Those things I don't know how to salvage really because people don't realize that a lot of permitting was allowed. Dougie was allowing himself to be an example to other, to like the city, like, hey, I've rented here. This is my friend. He come in here. He's gonna come here later on today to ask for a permit for something. You gotta let him
Right.
get through
He
with
greased
this.
the skids a little bit for folks.
The man was a piece of bacon. Okay, if you're
Well,
looking
he
for
also,
grease.
I just want to sort of reiterate what you're saying. Like his involvement in the community, not just his direct community, but like you said, with politicians, outreach, those sorts of things.
Yeah,
I mean, and he did that in Trinidad too. I remember like BSO went down to
the
Trinidad
ICP.
and for
Mm-hmm.
ICP, and it was like last minute something fell through, and Dougie and Junior, like Dougie hooked up with Junior, who's also a politician, and the
Yeah,
two of them like Dougie was the facilitator. He was the reason
Yeah.
that BSO had landed in skiffle. And then, like, that networking on his end is why I ended up meeting Junia, why Kendall Marcanotti have arranged for Skiffle Bunch for 5 years now, going on strong, and keep getting asked back, and why my students have got. I mean, all of that is because Dougie didn't sit around and like, well, somebody else will make this happen. He just went and did
No,
it.
no,
And
no, 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 no. One of the weird things is that when I got into Crossfire was during one of their serious rebuilding phases. The band had a lot of like infighting, people,
yeah,
too much porn going on and all kind of thing. So people were having their conflicts, and the arrangers were back and forth, and he was having conflicts with how things were being managed because it costs a lot of money.
yeah.
And the people that were trying to help him are kind of stealing from him. One moment that kind of changed the way I understood Dougie was that he had made the band. He started the band in 1999, maybe. I can't remember exactly the year, but he started the band however long ago. And some point through the course of the band, the board that he had elected or helped to elect to set up the band tried to replace him as the leader of the band.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him, well, how did you deal with that? And he explains to me how he, one by one, got them to turn on each other. Now, hearing this from him was interesting only because I'm like, I don't know if you realize this is not the good thing you want to tell to a young arranger. At this time, I was like
Mm-hmm.
25. Yeah, I was like 24, 25, 23 maybe. Just like squirrely out of school.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, why is he being this vulnerable to tell me that he's willing to break up, like how he broke up this group, like systematically, who he told what to, and he didn't lie. He didn't lie. He would do things like withhold a piece of the truth for a certain amount of time.
Mm.
Something that they didn't ask, he wouldn't say, things like that. And I'm looking at it like, why would he tell me this though? And it was in that moment that I realized he was trying to find someone to be vulnerable with. And he was looking for someone to share, like, this is how you do it. Like, I need someone that's receptive to know how to do these things. And he's always wanted to give the secrets away. What's unfortunate is in the Brooklyn Pan community, there's a lot of paranoia. The paranoia is brought about mostly from the starvation mentality, where they see somebody get something and assume that the reason that they got it was by not giving some of it to someone else.
Mm.
So I got a bag of corn. I got my bag of corn, but because I'm the leader of the USSA, it should have been my responsibility to give everybody a piece of corn because I had a bag of corn. What they forgot was that the leader of the USSA is just a spokesperson. So that bag of corn was for Crossfire. You work towards getting something, and
Mm-hmm.
they didn't work towards getting it. But that's the kind of thing that started to happen with everyone that became a USSA president. That your job is not to help your own band, it's to help every band. So unless they were doing things that were moving 8 or 9 bands of people at once that were benefiting large swaths of people, it wasn't considered legitimate. So some of the Brooklyn community became distrusting of Dougie. Why? You tell a bunch of people you're very sensitive fans, what do you think is going to happen? Someone's going to be a saboteur. Someone's going to talk too much. Someone's going to feel like, no, you shouldn't have it. So I'm going to block you from doing it. That's an actual thing I've seen. I've been on phones with people. Like I'm there. I'm on speakerphone listening to them talk about how they're trying to sabotage the band.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, boy, I know the man trying to rent you the yard. Like I tell them they have all kind of party and things. Nah, I don't want them to have the yard. Fuck the guy, I don't like he is a seriously. That's the kind of thing that they would do. And I would be on speakerphone when the guy off, yeah, right, I'll call you back. Quincy, gets that? I was like, damn, all right, I'll let Dougie know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of thing you would laugh at. And you'd go tell Dougie, and Dougie would make some joke. He'd say, that's Oshun, Dougie was versed in like things about Orisha tradition and all of that. So he'd say like, yeah, you know how Oshun is. And then he would laugh. That
Yeah.
damn laugh.
Well, one of the thing, my wife is a pastor, as I mentioned, and she's spent some time with people who have gotten sick or have had to die, and during Corona, and the thing that breaks my heart the most about just the circumstances around when Dougie had to pass was being lonely. And I still to this, like, Dougie was never lonely. He was never by himself. There was always somebody,
No.
whether it be with his,
Unless he wanted to be.
unless he wanted to be, but like his wife with the food in the yard. Everybody,
Yeah,
like he
yeah.
built a community around him, and just the idea that it ended while being alone is just the heart. Like, to me, like, that's, I'm not being rational about it. Like, I know Dougie was never really alone, but like it hurt. It sucks. I don't know how to like think about that stuff. But I will say this, Quint. I think Dougie. I'm just going to challenge you a little bit here, and then I'll let you go. I think Dougie's
Mhm.
not wrong about you being a good politician, and I think there's a hole there. And I would say I would lobby for you to pick up that that mantle and run with it, because it's important work, truly important
Yeah.
work. It has to be done by somebody. It needs to be done well, and you are a very thoughtful person, and you
I
lead.
curse
You
too
lead.
much.
What's that?
I don't. The idea of decorum, like when I know someone's deflecting,
But
I'm going to be the radical one. They're
but
like,
you don't.
no,
But
no, you can't
just
just curse everybody out.
But you can. But I think the one thing I think Dougie did is he figured it out in his own way. When you say, "Come here, I want to show you how it's done," I think he wanted to
Yeah,
show you how he figured it out, and I think
yeah,
he chose you in some weird way because he knew you would figure it out in your own way. You don't need to be the politician
true.
Dougie was. Dougie didn't. Dougie had a lot of decorum and could sort of like dance around issues, and if you can't,
Yeah,
if he thought that was a deal breaker for you, he wouldn't have talked to you in that way. And
true.
so
That's true.
I would say you should not use it as a superpower. Use your lack of decorum as a superpower, and go in there, and if you can use your little pickaxe and knock loose a shitload of money for the pan scene, I think your time will be well spent. But man, that's just my advice to you as a friend challenging you. I think you could do some good
You're
work.
the third person since this pandemic started to tell me this exact same thing.
Well, then take it as data points that you Quint, as a wise person, should probably look at as data points that you should look at. Buddy, I appreciate your time. It's always good to talk with you, and I don't know that we solved anything, but I learned something, and that's kind of all I care about. So thank you. Safe travels out there, and tell the Castle you're going to rehearse with Cassim right now.
That was yesterday or the day before. That was one of those days. I think they're gonna rehearse again today. They're
Okay.
trying to do some recording, and Lance wants me to participate.
Yeah. Well,
Let's hold.
do me a favor and tell them I said hello, and then I miss everybody there dearly, and they'll all roll their eyes, and it's fine. But just tell them I miss them all dearly, and thanks again for your time,
Absolutely.
buddy.
Thanks, man.
All right, take it easy. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on in So Percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner, builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Alejandro Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.